Guys, with the election around the corner, there is a lot of concern, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anger that has been going through the nation. We're so divided right now. We're having two candidates that are coming together that are honestly polar opposites. With that, we can see protest, we can see demonstrations, there can be civil unrest. So today we're going to take a look at 10 different things to consider with the election, again, right around the corner. Now, number one is to try to avoid cities, try to avoid college towns, places that could possibly have demonstrations and they could get out of hand. Obviously, there's a lot of people that live in those areas, and so having some considerations for that, being prepared. For us, we live in a more rural area, even though the city's not that far away. And so we want to avoid having to go through. Now, you may be traveling, and that's one issue, especially through a city, even if it's a major freeway, because a lot of these, as we've seen in the past, can be blocked. And then there can be a lot of violence that follow, especially those that are trying to get through the demonstration or the protest. So number one is just avoid major metropolitan areas. Now, if you live in the city, one option is to escape, get out of Dodge, go maybe to your brother-in-law's house or go to family members that live outside of the area, and give it a few days to be able to just kind of calm down. And I think that's one thing that it'll give you some time. I know that's not always possible, especially if you work and you have to continue to work during the week, but maybe getting your family out may be a good option. Well, guys, basic supplies, food, water, toilet paper, the items that you might need over the next few days. Go ahead and get those put back. Obviously you'll be able to use those and go through them over time. But get yourself in good shape to where if you don't have to leave the house, you won't. Now, being at home, consider security. First off, lock your doors. At night, if there are protests going on, dim the lights down. You can make it look like there's nobody home. It's almost like the movie The Purge, and you're going to stay at home, you're going to kind of bunker in. Now, with security, one of the best weapons in case you have encounters, in case protesters come up to your door or you start having some issues, is pepper spray. And one of the things about a mob is that having a firearm might not necessarily be the answer. And so having pepper spray a lot of times diffuses a crowd, it gets them out of the way, and it allows you to escape. And while those guys are dealing with pepper spray on their face, you're able to get out of the way. But number two is a firearm, because that is a last resort. And I want to really emphasize last resort. I mean, we've seen some instances where firearms were used and it became a national incident and charges were made, but most of those guys were actually able to get through it. But guys, if you are carrying around a firearm, you have got to be very careful and very mindful, especially in a protest situation where there's a lot of people around. But in a last resort, that could be what saves you and your family's life. And then the consequences come, but it makes it worth it. But again, just avoid using a firearm if at all possible. Now, number three is if you have a baseball bat or you have some kind of weapon that you can use, but because a lot of cities won't allow for firearms. But there were a number of instances where mobs attacked people, maybe protecting their business, and they ended up either beating them down to where they had to go to the hospital or they actually killed them. And so having some kind of weapon in your hand, a handheld weapon, is going to be very dicey. And so you really want to avoid that as well, because mobs can overcome you, I don't care what you have. And also flashlights. You need to have lights, especially when it's at night, making sure that you can use that for security if you need to, knowing what's going on around. One of the big things, though, about these situations is that with the police called away, they're monitoring the crowds, they're all over the place. A lot of criminals may take the opportunity to actually break into your home. So you've got to be ready for that. And so again, make sure your windows, your doors are locked, make sure you keep it down low, but if you need to, make sure you're prepared in case there's any kind of criminal activity that has nothing to do with the protest. Making sure that you have first aid, that you have a trauma kit. Emergency services could be very busy and may not even be able to get to you. So make sure that you have the supplies you need in case there is some kind of injury. Also, if you're on medications, make sure that you have plenty to get through at least a week or so ahead of time. Now, with civil unrest and some of the protests we've seen, there's been a lot of fires. It's one of the favorites. They like to light fires, businesses on fire. Having fire extinguishers That's going to be vital, and it could reach your house. And so make sure that the fire extinguishers, if you have them, are up to date. But definitely get yourself a couple of fire extinguishers just in case. Now again, you live in the city, you want to get out, and the protests are already started. There's some issues going on. Using major freeways can be a big no-no, and a lot of times they will block those major freeways. So go ahead and take a map, look through escape routes, places that are kind of off the beaten path. It's going to take you longer, but it'll get you to safety if you need to. And so go ahead and have those escape routes and a plan set aside, ready to go if you need to. And with that, you need a get-home bag or a bug-out bag. Have something that you have your immediate survival needs to where when you hit the road, you've got the stuff you need. Now, you may have to actually abandon your house, and that bug-out bag is going to give you some items that you need just for survival. And one thing that I would definitely have in there is a change of clothes, your toiletries, and of course, just regular basic survival items that you could use in a dangerous and bad situation. And if all possible, make sure that you have your firearm. Now, local news is going to be important to gather information. A lot of times we watch national news, we're looking at the TV, and we don't really see local events happening around us. Make sure that you tune into local news, see what's going on. If there are protests happening, you're going to have a heads up, and you're going to know that something's going on. And typically, they'll tell you the area that that's happening in. My father-in-law was in a pretty major city in Tennessee, and he was driving down the road in town and actually came up on a protest. And this has been a couple of years ago. He was stopped at a red light. He couldn't move. The protest was going on around him. He had a friend to call him and say, hey, there's a protest going on at so-and-so street. And my father-in-law said, yeah, I'm sitting in the middle of it. And so getting those heads up before you just kind of drive through town thinking nothing's wrong, you got to be careful. Again, being forewarned is being forearmed, and that way you can avoid the situation. Now, one issue really to consider, and this is not something that honestly I have a remedy for because I've seen this over and over, is being in a vehicle, getting trapped, and then people jumping up on your car or getting in front of your car and blocking your way. To me, that's where pepper spray would really probably be your best option. But sometimes it doesn't matter if you're compliant or not, and you're just trying to get out of the way. These people want to make a statement, and so a lot of times they will block your vehicle. One thing about it, some states have actually passed laws that if you're standing in the road and you get run over, that's on you. But a lot of areas are not like that. So if you find yourself in that kind of situation, guys, it can be very dangerous. And I think really pepper spray is one of the best ways if it starts to get violent. The one thing you don't want to do is get out of your car. And so make sure your doors are locked, make sure that your windows are up, and be ready to go anytime something breaks in a certain area where you can get through. But a lot of times with those drivers, tempers get high. And then you have those that are protesting out in front of you, and they're just dead set on not moving. So you really need to avoid those areas. And again, having some escape routes, having some ways to get around different places. If you work in another part of the city, double check. Again, make sure you know local news, you've got that down. Make sure that you do have those routes to get around. And of course, GPS can work fine, but yet having a local, just a regular map is going to be good to be able to map out those areas in case you need to get around certain dangerous areas. So guys, honestly, we don't know what's going to happen, but there is a very strong possibility we could have some problems. And so to be ready to go and to have the items you need set aside, again, guys, make a plan. You need to have some idea if things start to go south and not have to panic and just run out. Unfortunately, most of us live in urban type or suburban areas, and those areas can be affected. So just be careful out there, make sure that you stay as safe as you can, and the one thing you definitely want to avoid is confrontation. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America, long live the Republic. Now, being at home, you're going to have to consider security. You have to go different places. Okay. And I've never seen two candidates that are so, that's probably not true. Probably not. But again, avoid using